Itabasa liman. Australian defense. Australian attack defense.
Bob Dia. I'm Steve Bracks, former Premier of Victoria, Australia and patron of the Balibo House Trust. It gives me great pleasure to welcome you all here and to acknowledge His Excellency Ajou Pereira, Minister of the Presidency of the Council of Ministers, Her Excellency Helen Tuna, New Zealand Ambassador to Timor-Leste, Her Excellency Caton Wilson, Australian Ambassador to Timor-Leste, Senor Paul Moniz Mayor, President of the Municipality of Bobonaro, Senor Casimiro dos Santos, Local Administrator of Balibo, Senor Antonio Marley, Chair of the Timorese Press Council, the Secretary of State for Communications, Expedito Ximenez, and representatives of the Balibo House Trust, Terry Bracks, Monica Ferry, James Kelly and Evan Shackleton.
Bom dia. House Steve Bracks, Padreiro ba Balibo House Trust. Idanek solok bot may how atu simu imihotu yane no reconoce. Su Excelencia Presidente José Ramsota ka representante. Su Excelencia Agio Pereira, Ministro do Presidência do Conselho do Ministro. Su Excelencia Helen Tuna, Embaixadora Nova Zelândia e Timor-Leste. Su Excelencia Caitlin Wilson, Embaixadora Austrália e Timor-Leste. Senhor Paulo Muniz Maia, Presidente da Autoridade do Município Bobonaro. Senhor Casimiro dos Santos, Administrador Posto Balibo. Senhor António Che Mali, Presidente do Conselho de Imprensa Timor-Leste. Representante Sira José Balibo House Trust. Senhora Terry Bracks, Senhora Monica Ferry, Senhor James Kelly, no Senhor Ivan Shackleton. Ivan Makwan Mane, Hosi Journalista Nebe Hetang Oho.
Evan Shackleton is the son of murdered journalist Greg Shackleton, and in addition to being here as a member of the Balibo House Trust, Evan is representing the families of the Balibo Five. I'd like to also acknowledge his wife Julie and children Kate and James, and of course staff from the Community Learning Centre, community leaders and our many friends and guests from the Balibo community.
Ivan Wan Mane Hosi Journalista Nebe Hetang Oho, Greg Shackleton. No alende hane san membro ida Hosi Balibo House Trust. Ivan representa Familia Hosi Balibo 5 Australia. How mo sakar reconhece Nefen, Julie, no Juan Sira, Kate, no James. No claro, pessoal Sira Hosi Centro Balibo Community Learning Center. Líder comunitário Sira, no amne belu no bay nakabarak Hosi Comunidade Balibo.
Friends, it is difficult to believe that it was 50 years ago that 5 young journalists flew from Melbourne to Darwin and on to Delhi to investigate rumours of Indonesian incursions across the border. Fearful of imminent invasion, they painted an Australian flag on the building in front of me. That today is known as the Flag House Community Learning Centre.
Belum sira. Susah ratu fiar katak iatinan 50 liuba. Jurnalista foi ensaio 95, Sema Hosi, Melbourne, Mai Darwin, no Mai Liu Dili. Hodi investiga boato sira konaba incursão Indonesia, nian Liu Hosi frontera. Tawag pa invasão nebe basic, sira pinta bandeira australianian, ia edifício, ia haunia oin, nebe ohin loron conhecido honaran uma bandeira Balibo 5 Community Learning Center ka Balibo CLC.
As international journalists, they believe their independence would be respected if they encountered invading forces. They were truly international journalists. Greg and Tony were Australian, Brian and Malcolm from the UK, and Gary was a New Zealander.
Nudar jornalista internasional sira fiar katak sira ni independência, se retan respeito, se sira hasuru força invasodor sira mak jornalista internasional sira duni. Greg no Tony mak australiano, Brian no Malcolm hosi Reino Unido, no Gary mak Emma Nova Zelandia.
I can still recall hearing the news on the radio that the journalists were missing. I was just 20 then, just a year younger than the youngest missing journalist, 21-year-old Tony Stewart. It was devastating when we finally got the news that they were dead.
How se lembra na fatin? Wai hira rona noticia ia radio katak jornalista sira lakon. How hoi darit ruanulu? Tinang idade ki ikliu, hosi jornalista nebe lakon hoi darit nurak. Tinang ruanulu racing ida Tony Stewart. How mayo si Ballard no koyo si familia Stewart.
Did the Australian, British and New Zealand governments at the time express diplomatic outrage and seek to hold the Indonesian government to account? As the families of the murdered journalists know all too painfully well, the governments did nothing. All three accepted Indonesia's claim that their son's brother's husband died in crossfire.
Governo Australia, Inglaterra, Nova Zelândia, hatudo indignação diplomática, não buka tu responsabilidade ba governo Indonesia. Hanesan família sira hosi jornalista sira nebe mate hatene katak. Triste tebes governo la hal buat tidak. Sira na intolo aseta Indonesia nia reklamação sira nia wan mane maun alin lain mate iha tiru cruzado ka ia funularan.
Official inquiries led to more questions than answers. It wasn't until the New South Wales Coronial Inquiry in 2007 that we finally got the truth. They were murdered by the Indonesian military, as was Australian ABC journalist Roger East, 7 weeks later when Indonesia mounted a full-scale invasion on the 8th of December.
Inquérito oficial sira, lori ba pergunta barak liu, do que resposta sira. Laos to inquérito, New South Wales Coronial iha tinang rihung rua resi hitu, mak deklara dehan, ami ikus mai hetan lia los. Sira hetan oho hosi militar Indonesia. Hanesan jornalista australiano Roger East, semana hitu liutia, bai hira Indonesia halu invasaun ho escala bot, iha loron hitu fulan dezembro.
They did not die in vain. Other journalists, most notably Jill Jolliffe, who devoted her life to exposing the truth, kept their story alive. And the story of the horrific consequences of the invasion of the Timor-Leste people. In 2003, the families of the Balibo Five, with the support of the Victorian government, established the Balibo House Trust as a memorial to the slain journalist and to support the Balibo community.
Sira mate la saugati. Jornalista sira seluk liu Jill Jolliffe, nebe dedican Moris hodi fossai los, mantém sira ni história Moris. No história com a consciência, a teve suas invasão povo timoruan. E a tina rihurua resintolu, família sira hosi Balibo 5, ho apoio hosi governo Vitória, hari Balibo House Trust, hanesa memorial ba jornalista sira, nebe mate no hodi apoio a comunidade Balibo.
50 years since they were murdered, Balibo is thriving, thanks in part to the work of the Balibo House Trust, which you will hear more about shortly. I want to thank and acknowledge the support of the Australian Embassy for today's commemoration and for the community games of football and volleyball. The Australian Embassy, through its direct aid program, has contributed to the refurbishment of the cafe, the gazebo, and the Community Learning Centre and the upgrades in the memorial room, which will be open to everyone after the formalities. Thank you, Ambassador Caitlin Wilson.
Ohin, tinan limanulu, desde sira hetang oho, Balibo saidi akliutan, tanba servisu hosi Balibo House Trust, nebe itabot sira, seiro na liutan iha tempo badak tu irmai. How hakarak agradece no reconhece apoio Rússia embaixada Austrália ba comemoração ohin no ba jogo comunitária futebol no voleibol. Embaixada Austrália lihusi nina programa ajuda direta contribui ona ba renovação café cafeteria gazebo no CLC no atualização sira e sala memorial nebe sei loke ba ema hotu hafoi ramata idane. Agora how hato agradece no obrigado ba embaixadora Austrália Kate Wilson.
It is now my great pleasure to introduce Senor Paul Montes Mayer, the President of the Municipality of Bobonaro. Senor Mayer.
Idene agradece how se introduce Presidente Autoridade do Município Bobonaro, Senhor Paulo Muniz Maia.
Obrigado, Barak, pela oportunidade. Agradeço para nós, Romak, tamanha graça. Toma que nebe forma ita, ori ohin, ita bela halibur malu ya fatin ne. Há um silêncio, não há cruot bok, ba matibian siraotu, inclui itane asuaim belun diak, no mangwalin na lima, usi Austrália nebe. Fakar sirane ran barai dene at bele hetan independência anesan raiseluk e mundo. Há um respeito ba Sua Excelência Ministro Conselho do Ministro Senhor Dr. Azil Pereira nebe representa Sua Excelência seu Primeiro-Ministro. Há um respeito ba Sua Excelência Secretário de Estado de Comunicação Social, Dr. Espírito Dias Jimenez. Há um respeito para Sua Excelência Embaixadora, Austrália, para Timor-Leste. Há um respeito para Sua Excelência Embaixadora, Nova Zelândia, mais Timor-Leste. Há um respeito nós para o reverendíssimo amo paróquio Santo Antônio Balibo. Excelência Presidente do Conselho de Empresa de Timor-Leste. Excelência Diretor Executivo Centro-Sega. Excelência Provedor dos Direitos Humanos e Justiça. Excelência Diretor Executivo Museu Nacional da Resistência. Excelência Comandante PNTL Posto Balibo. Haunia Kruk Haunia hakuak bot ba dirigente sirahotu hahusi nacional to município nebe marca presença ba oin lorong idane. Haunia hakuak bot mos ba administrador do posto administrativo Balibo hamutu ko estrutura sir tomak. Haunia hakuak bot ba comunidade tomak nebe hola parte ia biban ida oin lorong. Excelentíssimo Comandante FFDTL, Destacamento Posto Tonovive. Saudações, senhores e senhoras, bom dia para Itahoto. Aunia, saudações para bem-vindo, para convidados de honra Hoto, nebema que marca presença e fato indane, e a âmbito de celebração, tina limanolo para acontecimento, massacre itania maluk, itani asuain no matadalan na Lima nebe lakon sirane vida anesa mos asuain Timoroan siraseluk ia fating histórico nebe ohin ita hanaran Balibo fight. Honra no privilégio bot ida ba ita bahau hamrigia excelência sirane hotuni oin e incapacidade hanesan presidente autoridade município Bunaro hodiato boas-vindas no breves palavras da celebração o em loro ninian. Excelências, distintos convidados, senhoras e senhores. Celebração Balibo Fight batina irene e tahalo hodi comemora tina limanolo acontecimento massacre ba Sirena em Lima e tem maluk jornalista jovem usi Austrália nebe inclui Brian, Greg, Malcolm, no Gary, Troy, Tony. Sirena em Lima niamate hanesan tragedi botida nebe acontece wanhira halohela filmagem ba acontecimento nebe mosu ia fulang outubro tinang rihungida at siya itnolores in Lima durante invasão Indonesia e Timor-Leste no ikus sirahetang kapturasaun o di sira mate ia fating irene incidente tragedi irene laos de tusik hela história ida permanece itania memória no itania consideração hodi foti lorong ne anesan lorong liberdade de imprensa mai be tragedi ne hatudu mai ita katak Sirena em Lima ia sentido de humanismo sentido de solidariedade no a cara que revela ba mundo itani sofrimento hoy nebe ita enfrenta. Durante período ida nebe, na kuko na falon Timor an sirahoto. Há um sentido de solidariedade profunda ba família sira nebe, Sirena em Lima, Husikela, Karik, e a balon ohin loron presente e a loron celebração idane. Há unia hakruk ba imi no agradece tamba imi bele maio. Hodi itamutu komora loron histórico idane. Celebração ohin laos date itahanoin hikas sa ida maka acontece ona basira na Lima. Mas be hosirania sacrifício sei halo duro liutan itania relação amizade entre ema ho ema no cooperação bilateral entre país Timor-Leste no país Austrália. Excelências, senhores convidados, senhoras e senhores. Sirena Lima maklakonona, hanesan most Timoruan riung asrua limanolo resin. Nebe la considerania vida, causa usi, bombardeamento, nebe lança usi, soldado Indonesia, que maioria civil, no feito no labar sira macmate. Sira ni sacrifício, o de lore último ba violação, sira hotu. Actos cruel sira, no abuso sira hotu, nebe halo, o de contra direitos fundamentais humanos ninian, nebe consagra ona, ia international Bill of Human Rights, no international human rights treaties, hanesan instrumento institucional, rua nebe hamosu Nações Unidas adopta Declaração Universal de Direitos Humanos e a dia 10 de dezembro de 1948. Além de Idanem, ita comemora tina limanolo, nudar autoridade município Bubonaro, hawa cara kusikela mensagem ida ou rua para governo central, liusi sua excelência, senhor secretário do Estado de Comunicação Social, senhor presidente do Conselho de Imprensa, senhor diretor executivo Centro SEGA, a tubele inclui e itania, e a itabo sirania plano baoin, o isa itabele desenvolve fatin Balibo Fight, sai fatin ida, além de bele dedica a nesse centro de memória ida, basira na em Lima, bele tulumos a tu fatin ida ne, bele sai centro de turística ida, onde atrai maluk visitante internacional sira. Precisa taumatan ba serviços comunitários sira, nebe de daune oferece a Balibo host 3, hanesan Centro da Bafeto, Centro Aprendizagem Comunitária, no Centro Clínica Banehan, no Serviço Selu-Seluktan. Há uma esperança ato Museu Nacional no Centro Sega, Belehare, ida neba oin, hamutuk, ho ame autoridade município Bonaru, o insa, ida bele, hamutuk desenvolve fatem ida ne, sai museu ida, ho condição, componente apoio sirseluk, atu atrai dia kliutan, visitante sira, o sirai liur, no railar. Hodim taumatan, rasik fatem ida ne, sirmos, bele, explora a paisagem, fura forro Balibo ninian, antes sira continua, bafatin sira seluk, hanesan, bemanas marobo, no fósil, ikan hos, nebe, tuir onexo nia, hanoin, descobrimento bot, número 1, e a mundo nebe, e a projeção se acontece, mobilidade bot, mais município Bonaru e a futuro. Ecos, há uma esperança ba, embaixador Austrália e a Timor-Leste, a toinsa e a nível nacional, belhanoin lisuk, o governo central, o de Hareba, maluk na Lima, siranian família nebe, o sikela, no ia concretização, a tuhalo fating irane, diak liutan, o di halo fating ida, e a condição diak, e a ema nebe, mai bima, espírito nebe, siracuda hela, a tu relação entre Timor-Leste e Austrália, belemetin liutan e a futuro oi mai. Dalai datan, hane bem-vindo ba excelência sira hotu. No mai ita hotu, asai itania, honra no hakruk, ho de respeita ba siranai lima. Nebe, dedica sirania, vida a tu rairane, bele independente no libre, hanesan na São Seluk e mundo. Sirane espírito, hoi ita, ita na fatin ho sirania espírito. Halo, ita halibur malu, ohin, e fatin dane, nudar exemplo, atu ita, banati tuir, ho di halo, força liutan, itania, relação, hanesan, povo, no relação entre nação Timor-Leste no Austrália. Hanoin, ano elia fuam bark mai dane, baten São Tomak, ao ato, obrigado bark.
Thank you very much, Senor Mayor. Could I now call upon Senor Antonio C. Bali, the Chair of the Timor-Leste Press Council.
Tuir mai ami convida Su Excelencia Presidente Conselho de Imprensa Timor-Leste. Fatino tempo a mi entrega.
First of all, I would like to say good morning to everybody who present here. His Excellency Minister of Presidency of Council Minister, Senhor Aju Pereira, Secretário de Comunicação Social, Senhor Espírito Dias Jimenez, Excellency Provedor de Direitos Humanos, Senhor Virgílio Guterres, Steve Brax, Sheffield Community Learning Center, Excellency Ambassador Australia, Miss Caitlin Wilson, Ambassador Nova Zelandia, New Zealand, Mrs. Helen Jane Tuna. I'm sorry if I don't pronounce the name correctly. Pambo Bonaru, Senhor Paulo Muniz Maya, haunia respeito. And my love goes to Evan Secleton and the family who are present here. It is a deep honor to stand here in Balibo, a place that carries both pain and pride in the history of Timor-Leste. Today, we mark 50 years since the Balibo tragedy, an event that took the lives of 5 young journalists who came here simply to tell the truth. Their courage and sacrifice remind us that the pursuit of truth is never without cost. This day also coincides with our National Press Freedom Day, a day to celebrate the resilience and commitment of all Timorese journalists who continue to serve the public with integrity and bravery. From the ruins of conflict to the promise of peace, our media has played a vital role in rebuilding trust, democracy, and national identity. The Balibo House Trust stands as a living symbol of the journey, turning a place of tragedy to a house of hope, learning, and opportunity for the community. On behalf of the people of Timor-Leste, especially the community of Balibo, I would like to express our heartfelt gratitude for initiative and efforts that brings positive impact on our community, particularly to our children and youth who are the future of these nations. Later on today, we will be also witnessing the launch of a scholarship program for Timorese journalists, generously provided by the ABCID. We extend our sincere thanks to ABCID for the continued support in strengthening media development and professional growth in Timor-Leste. As we remember the Balibo 5 and honor all who fight for the truth and justice, let us renew our commitment to defend press freedom, support ethical journalism, and ensure that no one is ever silenced for seeking the truth. All of us, especially the family of the Balibo 5, has been long seeking for justice for this tragedy. Yet, justice has not yet prevailed. Let us all continue our effort to find the truth and justice for the Balibo 5 so that their sacrifice will never be forgotten and the truth will one be prevailed. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much to Signor Marley. Very good presentation. Thank you. Could I now invite Her Excellency, the New Zealand Ambassador to Timor-Leste, Ms. Helen Tuna, to address you.
Hespeta Bar, the Minister of the Presidency of the Council of Ministers, Your Excellency Aju Pereira, Secretary of State for Social Communication, Your Excellency Expedito Diaz Ximenez, and other government representatives here, Provedor Virgilio da Silva Gutierrez, former Victoria Premier and patron of the Balibo House Trust, Steve Brax and Terry Brax, Chair of the Timor-Leste Press Council, Mr. Antonio Muniz Marley, the President of the Authority of Bobonaro Municipality, Mr. Paolo Muniz Maya, Australia's Ambassador to Timor-Leste, Your Excellency Caitlin Wilson, all of the representatives here today of the Balibo House Trust, friends, family and colleagues of the Balibo Five, the community at Balibo, but also to the Shackleton family, to Evan Shackleton and your family who are here today. Bon dia ba ita hotu, kia ora tātou. Today, as we know, we are here to pay our respects and to remember the Balibo Five, Channel 7's Greg Shackleton, Tony Stewart and New Zealander Gary Cunningham, as well as Channel 9's Brian Peters and Malcolm Rennie. We also remember Roger East and Sandar Tunis, the Timorese and all other media and the Balibo martyrs who were either attacked or died in the War of Independence or in the aftermath of the 1999 popular consultation. The Balibo Five were killed because they sought to tell the truth of what was happening in Portuguese East Timor in 1975. It was a tragedy that should not have occurred and which time has neither erased nor eased. And time has also not eased the pain and grief of the men's loved ones, friends and colleagues who I acknowledge today. In 2025, the pursuit of truth through a free and independent media remains a critically important pillar of democracy. Yet journalists are still dying and being incarcerated around the world and in ever-increasing numbers. And so it remains incumbent on all of us to stand firmly in defence of a free and a safe media. And I congratulate and acknowledge the efforts of the Timor-Leste Press Council in its pursuit both of quality journalism as well as safety of journalists, including through the Dili Declaration promoting press freedom, which I was pleased to see that both Australia and New Zealand had signed. I'd also like this morning to acknowledge the Balibo House Trust, its founders, former Premier, the wide network of supporters in Australia and New Zealand, and the community here. The focus and works of the Trust over 2 decades have not just preserved history and memories, but they've achieved lasting benefits for the health and the well-being of the wider Bobonaro community. And I'm pleased also that New Zealand remains a steadfast partner here in Bobonaro. We're working alongside partners in community policing, early childhood education, livelihoods through aquaculture, tourism, and with partners like World Vision in developing the young leaders of Balibo. While I'm speaking here today as the New Zealand ambassador, I want to take a moment and add a personal note. As the former Premier has said, 50 years ago I remember where I was, and I was a young school kid in rural New Zealand, wanting to be a journalist, when our family also watched and read the news about what had happened here. At 40 years ago, I got my job as a journalist, my first job. And for 2 decades, I worked alongside reporters and media colleagues who ensured that the Balibo Five were not forgotten, nor the circumstances of their deaths, as they are not forgotten today. Let me conclude by ending with a Maori proverb, the whakatoki, which I think captures our remembrance of the past and our appreciation of the present. Hei ata anō, te muri e tipo roa. This is a new day after a long night. I'll just speak for a few moments in Teton. Awanita ihanei, atu presta itania o gens, na atu hanoin hi kaswali Balibo Five, Greg Shackleton, Tony Stewart, Brian Peters, Malcolm Rennie, na Emma New Zealandaise Gary Cunningham. Ita mos hanoin hi kas Roger East, Timor-Leste, Media Hotu, no materas Balibo nian Hotu, Nibi mati tamba luta Timor-Leste nia ukunan. Balibo Five heta no oha tamba sera buka atu fosai lia luz. Nei mak tragedia nebi tuila los la belli acontece. Tempula halo ebi sera hadomi senti kman. Maski nunei I hatina 2025. Jornalista Serena Fatin la seguro na ita hotu iha responsabilidade ata protege media ira nebi livre no independente. Hanasan parte importante ira husi democracia. Owen Laurent, how mos hakarak reconnaisse Balibo House Trust, na minha equipa, maak itabot será atenzi ona ba comunidade. Mas gohin Lauren, how maak embaixadora Nova Zelândia, Dinan Limanula Liuba, how maak labarak fetu jovem, ina nebi hakarak sa jornalista. No iha tinan hat nulu Liuba, how hetan how nia suvisu dahuluk nura jornalista. How suvisu hamatuk ho emasera nebi, asigura katak Balibo 5, la haluha. Tane, Macau Senti ona tebis, Balamaka presenza ihane Owen. Hiata ano, tomori itiporoa. Iha loron faun, hafoin kala nebi naruk. Obrigada ba ita hotu nebi, ma iha nehi ohen loron. Obrigada bara. I'm going to...
Oh, okay. No. Thank you very much, Ambassador Tuna. Excellent speech. Could I now call on Her Excellency, the Australian Ambassador to Timor-Leste, Ms. Caitlin Wilson, please.
Thank you.
Well done.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I'll start by paying my respects to His Excellency Aju Pereira, Minister for the Presidency of the Council of Ministers, Secretary of State for Communications, Senor Expedito Diaz Jimenez, to the Provedor, Senor Virgilio Guterres, of course to our MC, former Victorian Premier, Mr. Steve Brax, and Terry, other members of the Balibo House Trust, to Senor Paul Moniz Maya, Presidente, Municipalidade de Bobonaro, PAM, Senor Casimiro dos Santos, Local Administrator, Senor Antonio Mali, Chair of the Timor-Leste Press Council. I'd like to extend a warm welcome today, of course, to family represented here, Evan Shackleton, your wife Jules, and your children Kate and Jack Shackleton. It's wonderful to meet you and to have you join today. I also want to acknowledge representatives of the FFDTL and PNTL, other representatives from government, members of the community, volunteers and employees at the Community Learning Centre, community members, and of course my colleagues and colleagues from the Australian and New Zealand Embassy, all participants today. So many important people to acknowledge. It's also hard after some very poignant speeches to come towards the end of the formalities. So I will just simply try to highlight a few messages that I wanted to reinforce that have already been laid out today. And while I listen to the very personal messages of experience from Australian and New Zealand colleagues, and think about, I was a very young person when 50 years ago, when this all transpired. So I confess not being able to remember what had happened, being so young, but what has been a memory and stayed with me and many other Australians of various ages is the legacy being kept alive. So again, I want to acknowledge that we're here today on the 50th anniversary since the deaths of 5 very young journalists from Australia, New Zealand and the United Kingdom based in Australia. Greg Shackleton, Tony Stewart, Gary Cunningham, Brian Peters, and Malcolm Rennie. And we also would like to remember Roger East, as we know, an Australian journalist killed 6 weeks later in Dili after investigating the deaths of the Balibo Five. On behalf of the Australian Government, I acknowledge the profound grief that families, family members, friends and colleagues have carried for half a century, and to pay my respects to the way you have kept the memory of the Balibo Five alive. 50 years goes slowly at times, and time does not dull the pain. These journalists came to Timor-Leste with a deep sense of purpose, and as others have already acknowledged, to tell a story that deeply mattered and to shine a light on events that many were not aware of. Their work and their sacrifice drew the attention of Australians to Timor-Leste at a critical moment in history. And while this was the beginning of many more years, they did help forge that early connection between Australians and Timorese, as we have already seen today by the fantastic community participation and hearing speeches from Pam Bobonaro and the President of the Press Council. These connections have only grown stronger over time. And the story of the Balibo Five is deeply woven into Timor-Leste's national history. The memory of these 5 exceptional reporters lives on also in the vibrant media landscape of Timor-Leste, and the impact is seen universally. Journalists continuing to pursue truth with courage and integrity. It also lives on in the friendship and collaboration between Australian and Timorese media professionals, then even more broadly in the grassroots connections between our communities that builds on empathy, on solidarity and shared values. You've heard a little bit about our new scholarship, but I'd like to now formally announce here in Balibo the launch of a new public interest journalism scholarship delivered by the Australian Embassy in partnership with ABC International Development. And ABC International Development, or ABCID, if you hear that acronym, that's who they are. A few colleagues here with us as well, representing the program. This will support young emerging Timorese journalists under the age of 30, remembering how young the Balibo Five were, and supporting journalists committed to public interest reporting. Successful applicants will be funded to travel to Australia for placements with ABC reporting teams and ongoing mentoring from ABC journalists to help develop and publish their work. We wanted to announce this initiative here in Balibo and on this very significant day, because this place, this story, symbolised the power and the responsibility of public interest journalism. And we hope that this scholarship is a symbol not only of our enduring media partnership, but even more so of the deep human connections. We can look around here today and see so many examples that demonstrate how the connections have grown. We stand in front of the house where the journalist stayed, and that has been very beautifully preserved by the Balibo House Trust, which beyond this building also supports local development projects. Also civil society, including unions, advocacy groups, and of course, the families of the journalists have all played a vital role in keeping the memory of the Balibo Five and Roger East alive. This advocacy helps build
membro governo Sira no representante membro governo Sira husi distrito Bobonaro niyan. Ohin tamay hamuto kiane, hodi hanoing hikas, jornalista australiano na lima, sira ne mate desde tinan 5 ba, sira ma Greg Shackleton, Tony Stewart, Gary Cunningham, Brian Peters, no Malcolm Rennie. Itamos hanoing hikas, Roger East, jornalista australiano ne be makamate ihedili semana neng kahitu, hafoing acontecimento balibo. Investiga hela, maluk jornalista balibo na lima ne mate. Hodi governo Australia ne naran, embaixadora Caitlin Wilson hakarak reconhece família no colega si mate biansira, basira niya tristeza no sentimento laran susar ne besira senti ka experienciona durante tinan 5 nulo ni laran. Embaixadora Caitlin mo hakarak hato, niya respeito ba maneira oing na be família no colega si mate biansira, halo na hodi preserva mate biansir na memória, atu continua moris na fating. Ita atene jornalista na lima ne mai Timor-Leste, o objetivo da nebe klean, atu fosa história da nebe importante, ba acontecimento da nebe mag emabarak si daw katene ya momento neba. Sira ne serviço makas no sacrifício, atrayon na emabarak kusi Australia, hodi atene kona ba Timor-Leste. Ya momento da nebe, crítico tebes ya Timor-Leste na história. Liusi dane, jornalista na lima nemos criou na conexão nebe klean entre povo Timor-Leste e Austrália, nebe sa metin liutan ho tempo. Haneseng tahare participação si comunidade Balibo no bobonaru niya barak tebes yane. Agora, história Balibo 5 ne kuda metingon he Timor-Leste na história nacional. Memória si jornalista na lima ne, moris na fating he setor media he Timor-Leste nebe dinâmico tebes, liliu ba malu jornalista sira, atu continua bukalielos, ho coragem no integridade. Serviço ne moris na fating he amizade no colaboração entre mídia profissional entre australiano e Timor sira. No itaharek e ligação nebe klean entre comunidade sira e base, nebe cria husi empatia, solidariedade, ho valor nebe fahe hanesan. Hanesan ohin mirona ona kona babol sa estudo nebe Senhor Antonio, husi Conselho de Imprensa mencionona, ohin lorong embaixadora Caitlin Wilson, ho formalmente hakarak anuncia kona ba lançamento bolsa estudo jornalismo ba interesse público nebe fornece os embaixada Austrália, li husi parceria ho ABCID. Karek maluk baru ronona, ABCID sene membro balu mos participa hane. Programa idane se for apoio ba jornalista foi sa Timor-Leste, nebe foi hahusir na carreira e área jornalismo, basira nebe tinang tulunulo may craik, hanesang ho matibian jornalista Balibo 5 nen 5 ne. No programa ne loke basira nebe iha komitmento ba reportagem interesse público niyan. Aplicante sira nebe sucesso, se halo viagem ba Austrália, ba colocação hamuto ko equipa reportagem ABC niyan. No siramo setor formação, no mentorização hamuto ko jornalista ABC, atu apoia sira hodi desenvolve no capacita sira ne serviço. Governo Austrália hodi representa embaixada Austrália hene anuncia inisiativa idane Balibo ohin lorong iha fating idane tamba fating dane ia história idane be maka simboliza kbit no responsabilidade de jornalismo ba interesse público niyan. Espera bolso estudo dane se sai símbolo la osjet ba parceria mídia nebe dura, may bemos ba ligação entre ema sira husi Timor-Leste no Austrália nebe. Advocacia dane ajuda ona hari cultura solidariedade no ligação entre povo australiano e Timor-Leste. Matebiang sira Balibo 5 niyan no Roger East marca momento na kukunida he história nebe nasaon rua ne faham hamutu. Sira ne legado saya nesang ponte ida nebe makliga nasaon sira Australia no Timor-Leste lihusi compaixão, cooperação no respeito malo. Maita continua fo honra basira ne memória Laoste tolia fuangka evento formal siranesang ne, may bemos liusite ne serviço ne beita halhamutuk. Obrigada barak.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Wilson, and thank you very much for that great announcement. It's outstanding. Could I now call on my good friend, His Excellency, Minister Aju Pereira, to address you. Thank you.
Agora meio-dia também. A tua reflexão ainda, né? Holy em inglês, para famílias Balibo 5 nenia, nomos para comunidade internacional e para maluxira o toca aqui a versão teto, versão português, a mitad a plataforma portal governo nenia para ver interessado a tu sai a tumbale. So I must say now good afternoon and welcome to all our very special guests. I know there are so many and I just endorse the greetings that my previous speakers have already conveyed. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, dear friends from Australia and also from Timor-Leste. We gather here, it's October 2025, to mark the 50th year since the tragedies of Balibo and also in Dili, as mentioned before, that claimed the lives of courageous journalists, the Balibo 5 and Roger East. 50 years ago, exactly, 5 young journalists in Balibo and 1 in Dili stood between silence and the rest of the world. They chose truth and they paid with their lives. Today, we remember them not as distant figures, but as echoes of our own responsibility to speak, to demand, to act. The National Press Day today shows the motto of press freedom for truth and justice. On this 50th anniversary, their stories demand distant footnotes of history. They remain wounds in our conscience, reminders of the human cost of conflict, the fragility of truth in war, and the heavy burden of moral responsibility across borders. In this commemoration, I wish to speak both to memory and to questions. why they were reporting in Balibo. What was the response to the deaths? And what meanings do these events have for Australians and as well to us Timorese? As we reflect on this half a century passage. On 16 October 1975, the 5 journalists from Australian TV came to this place, to Balibo, to investigate reports of invasions from Indonesian forces. The group was Greg Shackleton, Australian Channel 7 reporter, Tony Stewart, Australian Channel 7 sound recordist, Brian Peters, British Channel 9 cameraman, Malcolm Rennie, British Channel 9 reporter, Gary Cunningham, New Zealand, Channel 7, perfect view of the coast towards the Indonesian border. Soon after, they encountered Fretilin patrols and had contact with senior Timorese leader, now President Dr. Jose Ramos Horta. They were then able to film Indonesian naval ships offshore. The journalists stayed here, as we mentioned many times before. At that time it was a deserted house, which they painted with the Australian flag in the hope that their journalistic status might afford them protection. They dubbed the house the Australian Embassy, in recognition of the protection they hoped for to have but did not realistically receive. In the early morning of 16 October 75, Indonesian forces launched an attack on Balibo as part of a covert operation codenamed Operasi Flamboyant, to seize the key border towns of Maliana, Atsabe, and also Balibo. That was their first stage of the full-scale invasion of Timor-Leste. That morning, within minutes of filming advancing special forces soldiers, the 5 journalists were dead. They had been murdered in cold blood by Indonesian forces, intent on silencing them to suppress evidence of Indonesian military involvement in East Timor. For a moment, the Indonesian invasion forces drew back and hesitated, awaiting the world's official reactions to the murders. But there was none. Weeks later, Indonesian forces launched massive invasion that opened a brutal 25-year occupation, during which as many as 200,000 Timorese perished through violence, through famine, and forced displacement. It was nothing less than a humanitarian catastrophe. The official public Indonesian position, long held and repeated by subsequent Australian governments, was that the journalists died as incidental casualties of crossfire during the fighting. However, over subsequent years and decades, a very different account emerged, brought forward through testimonial evidence, inquiries, and most importantly, investigative journalism. As my good friend Steve Bracks mentioned before, in 2007 in New South Wales, the Deputy State Coroner, Dorel Pinch, conducted an inquest into the death of Brian Peters after pressure from the families, and in doing so, implicitly extended findings to all 5 journalists. Her findings were stark. She found that the Balibo 5 died at Balibo on 16 October 75 from wounds sustained when they were shot and stabbed deliberately and not in the heat of the battle by members of the Indonesian Special Forces. The coroner concluded that the journalists were not incidental casualties. They had been captured as non-combatants and then deliberately executed despite contesting their status. She further found compelling circumstantial evidence that the orders originated from higher levels, possibly up to Major General Benny Mordani, the then commander of the Special Forces. The coroner's report recommended that prosecutions under Australia's war crimes provisions be considered. However, that never happened. As Indonesian forces move in towards Dili, Australian aid workers and medical staff joined with other foreign correspondents in Timor and withdrew to Australia. Roger East chose to stay, planning to escape with Fretilin into the mountains and transmit reports back to Australia by radio. His final broadcast for ABC's Foreign Correspondence Report on 7 December 75 described invading Indonesian troops in the capital Dili. The next day, East was trapped in Dili and soon captured by Indonesian soldiers. After being taken prisoner, he was executed by one shot to the head at the wharf of Dili Harbor, along with mass execution of Timorese prisoners and civilians. He was executed as a continuation of the Indonesian campaign to silence independent news. In both the Balibo 5 and Roger East's death, as in the case of the Indonesian invasion of East Timor, allegations of collusion, suppression of truth, and diplomatic cover-up loom large. In short, decades of silence, classified files, and diplomatic deference have allowed much of the truth to remain buried in justice, if not in memory. As we mark 50 years since those deaths, what should such remembrance offer to the Australians and to us? There is honoring journalistic courage. The Balibo 5 and Roger East embodied the essential principle: the journalist risks their lives to report truths others would suppress. Their sacrifice demands we honor press freedom and protection from truth-seeking work, as our media personnel today alert us as much needed to be done. Foreign policy lessons. The Balibo and Roger East's deaths, as well as of the Timorese, provide a necessary caution against uncritical alignment with powerful nations. They show the moral cost of political compromise, and they also press us to center human rights, not only strategic interests in regional policy and alliance. For us, the Timorese, there is respect for suffering. Timorese communities, our communities, have endured profound loss over decades. Remembering the Balibo 5 and Roger East affirms their story is part of our nation's struggle for dignity and for truth. International solidarity. The presence of Australians and many other friends here acknowledges that Timor's cause has had many supporters beyond our borders. It strengthens years-long bonds of trust and moral partnership. 50 years is a long time. Yet remembrance matters precisely because justice is never automatic. Commemoration too is not passive. It is an active practice of memory, demanding transparency. For investigative journalism, it is about pushing for declassification, renewing investigations, supporting journalism training, and strengthening international norms of protection for journalists. Ceremonies are frequently held to celebrate, like today, not only the lives of Shackleton, Cunningham, Stewart, Rennie, Peters, and East, but also to recommit to the principles of free speech and international accountability. In Australia, memorials such as the War Correspondence Memorial in Canberra and in Timor, here the Balibo House, stand as precincts of memory. But memory alone is not enough. Although each generation must assert that truth matters, that the costs borne by those who spoke must not be in vain. 50 years is a long distance, and new generations in Australia and Timor-Leste may ask us, why dwell so long on events in 75? The answer is simple. It is because memory bridges time, and moral duty never expires. The legacy of the Balibo is inseparable from the history of Timor-Leste. Its struggle for independence, the regional politics that shape its fate, and the international pursuit for truth amidst violence and denial. Their sacrifice endures every act of remembrance, every step towards reconciliation, and every story that honors those who confront injustice. And they charge us, this generation and the next, to keep open the space for truth, for justice, and for remembrance. As Australians and as Timorese, neighbors linked by geography, history, and humanity, our responsibility is bound together. May this 50th anniversary not be a mere ceremony. We hope that this ceremony will keep us strength, give us strength, make us stronger to continue to pursue truth and justice. Thank you.
Thank you to Minister Azu Pereira. What an outstanding speech. It deserves another round of applause. It was just outstanding. Thank you, Minister. Very, very good. Very good.
We go for the
Yes, yeah,
exchange
yes.
first, and then we go for the refreshment
Yep.
or coffee. Then.
Yeah. I wonder if I could invite up onto the podium Evan Shackleton and the Balibo Martyrs for an exchange of gifts, if I could please. You mentioned the Balibo Martyrs.
Yeah. Dia, ho respeto a mi convida familia Balibo Martyrs. How many people will be coming to? Ami convida familia Balibo Martyrs na in Tolu. Señor Fernando Carvalho, Señora Apolonia, Señora Umbelina. Diak idene maka itatu troca presente entre familia Balibo Martyrs. Neve mate iha ema oho iha 99. Ho familia Balibo 5 Husi Australia.
Given that Evan is carrying so many ties, I wonder if Jules, Jack and Kate Shackleton could come up and help him carry some of these as well, please. This is the remove this. Now I have something for each of you. No, we'll give him some of these. Yes, it's for you. Thank you. No worries. It's for you. Thank you. Just hold it up so you can see what it is. Evan Shackleton, I wonder on behalf of the Balibo 5 family if you might say a few words.
Thank you. I'm very honoured to represent the families of the Balibo 5 today, but I cannot speak for them or on their behalf. We're all different and we all have our own voices. I'm only able to tell you how I feel. The 16th of October has always been a very hard day for me. I never know how I'm going to feel when I wake up, and I never really know what I'm going to do. Some days I listen to the music that my dad and I used to listen to, and I've still got some of his vinyl records to listen to. Some days I watch the movies that he took me to at the cinema, and sadly some days I just drink and drink until I fall asleep. I also want to remember the families of the Balibo martyrs and the people of Timor-Leste. Our shared pain is felt amongst all of us, and I understand that my story is dwarfed by the people of Timor-Leste's story. I wanted to say that I am so indebted to the people of Timor-Leste, and especially the people of Balibo, who have gone to all this trouble to commemorate this occasion. I am completely overwhelmed. I can never repay you, but I will try. From now on the 16th of October, I'm going to think of this amazing day that you have created and the wonderful and amazing people who I have met. I hope my dad's remains are somewhere here in Balibo, because the people of Timor-Leste, and especially the people of Balibo, are the only people that I trust to keep his remains safe. You are the perfect custodians of my dad's remains, and I'm deeply indebted to you, very deeply, for having done it for so long. Thank you.
Thank you, Evan, and the family. Thank you very much for those beautiful words. Well, in wrapping up, thank you to everyone who's contributed to this memorial by speaking or organising, and thank you for your presence at this significant event. There will be lunch for invited guests at the Fort Hotel and refreshments in the cafe here. Please take time to look at the new displays in the Flag House, just here. There's also an exhibition by the local artist Toto in the Veterans Museum just in the fort. Also, the Veterans Museum display is there as well if you're yet to see it. So, obrigado, thank you very much.
Obrigado ba Mahotu nebe contribuiona ba memorial idane. Lihosi qualia ka organiza no agradece ba Mahotu minha presença e evento significado idane. Sei almoço ba na kasira nebe hetang convite ia Fort Hotel no café ia cafeteria neba antes itaba sunulilin. Depois idane ita sei hare hamutuk exhibition phone ia uma bandeira ka uma Balibo 5 CLC no íamos exposição ida hosi artista local Toto ia Museu Veteranos Siranian ia Fort Hotel exposição Museu Veteranian se itabot sedau khare karik itabel hakat hamutuk ba. Dia, ami convida Sua Excelência no itabot sira, bainaka no convidado sira hotu, itaba cafetaria, fatin sore neba, ita hetanetik aihan rumah, depois ita continua ba sunulilin ya uma sina nebe maka sira mate ba. Ba tempo no fatin ami entrega. Dali datang convida ita hotu, atu ba iha cafetaria ita kotuk. Obrigado.
As the National Press Freedom Day of 2025 celebration comes to an end here in Balibo, the message remains clear, which is to remember, to honor, and to continue defending the truth. And so 50 years on, the spirit of Balibo 5 lives on, and not just in memory, but in unwavering commitment of journalists who continue to speak truth to power. And so from here, from Balibo Bobonaro, we thank you for watching.